Hey guys, so the end of the autumn holiday season is here and it's time to switch over into the winter holidays or Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's and all that good stuff, which means it's time to switch out our decorations, especially before all the freezes come and we lose our good produce like the pumpkins that we all have on our front steps and fences and around the house and all that good stuff. So rather than just throwing these pumpkins away and wasting all the great product that's within these pumpkins, we're going to do a couple different projects with them. We can do everything from canning the extra, to baking, to seed saving, to making great treats for the chickens that are outside, and all that good kind of stuff. So the first thing that we're going to do, what we're going to do in this video, is we're going to can the extra pumpkin that we're not going to use for baking. So first things first is we need to carve our pumpkin just like you would for a jack-o'-lantern. Take the top off and remove all the guts. So we finished cleaning our pumpkins and made out really well. We have a nice big bowl of guts and a nice abundance of seeds. And we're going to set those aside for later. And the next step in the process towards canning is we need to finish processing out this pumpkin, which means we need to skin it and we need to cut it up into chunks. There's all different ways you'll see of skinning pumpkins and what's the fastest and what's, easiest. And frankly, when it comes to skinning a pumpkin, it's time consuming and it's not easy. What I find is the best way to do is to cut it into these sections that the pumpkin already has itself right along the lines. I'll usually cut those in half, and then you can either use your knife or your peeler, depending on the piece, how tough the skin is, what the angle of it is, find out what works for you. I keep both on hand and kind of go back and forth with each piece of what is working. And then we'll cut it into small cubes and set it aside for the next step. I've already done one pumpkin, and as you can see, I filled up an entire pot, and plus a small container just from that one pumpkin of cubes. So we're going to process this one up next. Okay guys, so we've got our pumpkin all processed down and we're ready to begin the canning process. In order to can any type of winter squash or pumpkin or anything to that effect, it is a low acid food, which means we're going to want to use a pressure canner, not a hot water bath. And in order to get it ready to go in the pressure canner, we have to steam it and get it nice and soft first. If you haven't steamed before, steaming is really simple. You can buy a steamer or you can rig something else up on your own. But the idea is that your product is going to go in a type of colander that's going to sit above boiling water. So this pot is a little bit smaller than the one below it. The water is only filled enough to create steam. The water isn't actually touching the food in there. So we'll just leave this for about 25 minutes so that all the food can sit there and boil in the steam. And when we want to know if it's done or not, if it's tender enough, what I usually do is I'll take a fork, I'll stick it in one of the cubes. If it sticks on the fork like it is right now, it's not ready. But if I pick it up and it slides right back off that fork, then it's tender enough to be ready. And while that is steaming, which I've already steamed some of it, while it's finishing up, we're going to get everything else ready for our canning. We need all different things. We need our tongs for picking up the cans. We're going to need a funnel that the mouth fits in the size can that you have. We're going to want tongs and ladles for touching our hot food. You're going to need a wooden cutting board or several layers of towels to protect the hot jars from the cold surface of your countertop. You don't want them to crack that way. And you're going to need your jars and lids and rings. I'm using normal standard, not the wide mouth standard rings for quart-sized jars. And And what you want to do with these is everything needs to be completely sterile when you're canning. So I've got all the lids and rings that I'm going to be using so far in a pot back here with hot water. I'm going to bring it to a simmer. When it brings it to its simmer, I'm going to remove it from the heat and just let those sit in that hot water. And everything's been washed really well beforehand and sanitized. Behind me, where you can't see in the sink, I've got all my jars just sitting in a hot water bath right now, keeping them nice and warm and sterile and up to temperature so that when we add our hot food, we're not going to crack cold jars. They're already heated up. In this pot, I've got water that's getting ready, that's boiling down to pack on top of the food when we put it in our jars. You are going to do a hot pack when it comes to winter squashes or pumpkins or anything to that effect. And if you don't know, the difference between a hot pack and a raw pack is you're either going to cook the food first and pack it hot, so the food is hot, the liquid is hot, etc. A raw pack, you're going to pack your food fresh, cold, and right out of the fridge. So we're doing a hot pack for this. In the oven below me, oh hey babies, I'll be right there. In the oven below me, I do have a pan in there that's getting ready. I've got the oven on a ridiculously low temperature, so it's not actually cooking, but it's going to keep my food hot until I'm ready to can, because as you can see, I have an abundance here to go into cans, and only so much fits in my steamer. So I'm going to let that steam. I'm going to add it down below to keep it nice and hot until we're ready, and then I'll bring you guys along on the next step. And I'm going to go get my baby. Alright guys, we've steamed all of our pumpkin. It's ready to go. It's ready to start the actual canning process. I'm sorry I don't have the best view here, but there's only so many places to put the camera in the kitchen. But the first thing that we're going to do is pull our jars out of the hot water. Hey babies! I'm going to stick our funnel in the top of the jar and use our tongs to fill this up with our hot pumpkin up to about a ½ inch within the top of the jar. Hey babies! Okay, babies. Alright, once we've got that nice and filled, we've got our hot water here. You're much better off if you have a tea kettle, but I unfortunately don't own one, so I'm using a soup ladle to bring the boiling water over and fill the jar up around the pumpkin to within that ½ inch of the top. Be careful because the glass is going to get very hot at this rate. And then I've got my non-metallic spatula. And I'm going to go in the jar. Make it so that you can see. Go in the jar and move it right along the edges of that jar. What I'm doing is I'm releasing any air pockets that got trapped. And as you can see, I lost a little bit of water at that rate, so I'm going to put my funnel back on and just bring that water back up to within the ½ inch of the top. Okay. And then I've got my clean towel that I'm going to wipe off the top of the jar and make sure that there's no food stuck to it. Again, be careful of your fingers. And then I'm going to take out one of my lids and rings from the hot water that I've got over on my side here. Use my towel to get that on nice and tight. And because the jar is so hot, I'm going to use my jar tongs. And I'm going to put that down in my pressure canner which I have about 2 inches of water in the bottom of. You're placing it on a rack so it's not touching the bottom of the pot. It's also not touching the sides of the pot. And when you put the rest of your cans in, you're also going to make sure that the cans aren't touching each other. This is going to allow the steam and the pressure to free flow through all of the jars really well. If you have enough space to make a second layer, I'm using bigger jars so I don't. But if you were going to do a second layer, you're going to stagger your jars so that one isn't directly on top of the other so that you have the same effect and the steam can move along really quickly or really easily. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these jars really quickly and then I'll show you where to go from there. Alright, so I've got the cans that'll fit in here done. I'm going to have to do another batch afterwards. But as you can see, they're very close to each other, but none of them are actually touching or touching the sides of the pot. And I'm going to go ahead and lock my lid on here. I've got the lid locked on. Some pressure canners have different types, but just make sure it's locked on nice and tight. We're going to let the water get to a boil and let the steam come out our vent pipe, which is right here, for about 10 minutes so that there's no air left inside before we cap it off. So once we had allowed the steam to release for that 10 minutes, we took our pressure regulator cap and we covered up our vent so that the pressure was able to build, and we watched our gauge and we brought it to 10 pounds of pressure. Once it got to 10 pounds of pressure, we kept a really close eye on it, adjusting our heat to the burner to make sure that it stayed at that 10 pounds, not changing the heat too quickly, not dropping it too low or increasing it too high too fast. You want to keep a really close eye on it, leave it for about 90 minutes at that 10 pounds of pressure. Once the 90 minutes was up, we removed it from the heat and we're letting our pressure decrease for about 10 minutes. That 10 minutes is up, so now I'm going to re-release our valve, or our pressure regulator from our valve. And of course, be careful that you're not going to burn yourself with the steam when you release it. I don't know if you could hear that whistle of the pressure going. And we're going to leave it for probably about another 10 minutes or so. Make sure that the pressure has completely gone out before we take our lid off. So now we're going to remove our lid and remove the jars from the water. And just remember to always, got a little bit of pressure release there. Open it away from you in case steam bursts out. So remember, steam can leave very severe burns. Let me put that aside. You're obviously going to use your jar tongs to remove the jars. I'm going to put the jars, as I said before, either on a wooden cutting board or on several thicknesses of dry towels. They can't be damp at all. You don't want them to come in contact with anything cold, because otherwise you can crack or explode your jars. Let's see how that came out. And you're going to let these cool probably for quite a few hours, or now it's nighttime, so I'm going to let them cool right overnight. And you can listen and you'll even hear from the other room a high-pitched pop, and that's going to be your seal happening as the jars are cooling. And then when you're done, when they're totally cooled, when you've heard all the pops and you know that they're ready to touch, you can push on the lids. And just like anything, like when you get from the store, how you open it and it makes that pop, and the lid pops back out to the top, you're going to make sure that there's no play in the lid, that when you push on it, it stays down and doesn't release back. That's when you know you have a good seal. You can remove your rings, save them for later, and you can store your jars. We'll take our scraps and head out to the chickens in the morning to give them a nice treat with the guts.